Well, hello and welcome to this live stream event, AI and the Future of Accountancy. My name is Richard Anning. I'm the head of the IT faculty here at ICAEW, and it's my great pleasure to guide you through the next 30 minutes. And I'm delighted to introduce two guests who are with me this afternoon, who have joined us for this discussion. Professor Moshe Vardi is an expert in AI and Professor of Computer Science at Rice University, Texas. And Moshe, you're here hot foot from annual lecture in Brussels last night, and a lunch round table that we've had just now talking about AI, so we're working you quite hard, so we appreciate your time.
The fun continues.
And also Kirsten Gillen, colleague and technical manager in the faculty, who's been leading our work in this area and is the author of the latest Thought Leadership report, AI, Artificial Intelligence and the Future of Accountancy, which is being launched today, and no doubt you'll be talking about that a bit later on.
Yeah.
So we've got 30 minutes for this live stream event, and what we plan to do is we'll have a few opening remarks from Moshe and from Kirsten, and then we'll open it up to discussion and questions that we've been gathering in the run-up to this event. And also you can tweet questions on hashtag ICAEWAI, and I've got Hootsuite open here, so any questions that you want to put through we can pick up as we go through. The context for this event is the increasing noise we hear around AI and its impact on society and the profession. It seems that barely a day goes by without another news headline predicting the demise of jobs in another sector or industry, and I seem to recall reading this morning about HMRC implementing artificial intelligence to do some of the lower level work and have other people moving up the value chain. So why now? What is the series of events that's led us to this situation? Should we be concerned at the rate of progress, or should we be driving policymakers to shape regulation in this area? Moshe, I know this was the subject of your lecture last night. How will we be affected in the accountancy profession? Which roles are safe and which are at risk? And are we in a position even to say that currently? What is the impact on skills and training? What do we need to teach our younger student members? And how should we be preparing our older members? Should we in the profession be thinking about taxing robots and the implementation of a universal basic income? So Moshe, I wonder if I can turn to you for a few introductory comments, maybe a reprise of your lecture last night, which was about outthinking humans, and any thoughts that you've got at this stage.
It's my pleasure. I'm a researcher in artificial intelligence. Specifically, my area is automated reasoning. And I've been doing it now for 30 years, and I'm having great fun doing it. And about 5 years ago, the field has made such progress that I started thinking myself, what are going to be the societal implications of this success? For a long time, it seemed like the artificial intelligence is some faraway dream, and we didn't have to worry about consequences. But suddenly, it seems it's right here. And one particular event that I think is going to be a watershed event is the automation of driving. I mean, we have seen the Google car, we hear a lot of noise about it, and this is still, technology is still being developed. But it now become clear that this is going to happen. We will automate driving, something that has been, this will be really a transportation revolution akin to the Ford Model T, for example. And I think it's going to be amazingly beneficial development, because right now, when we do the driving, we are lousy drivers. We kill more than 1 million people per year. Okay, if you want to know who's responsible, look to your left, look to your right. We're responsible for it, and we have a chance to do something about it. So this is, I can't cure cancer, but maybe I can help save 1 million lives per year. So this is a wonderful development, except that just in the United States, there are about 4 million taxi and truck drivers. And there are millions of other people who don't have a formal title of a driver, but really that's their main job, is driving vehicles. And we can accept the vast majority of these jobs to disappear. So I started asking myself, okay, what will happen when these jobs disappear? And the traditional economics orthodoxy says not to worry. Technology destroys jobs, and it creates new jobs. Everything works out. The economy is going to be in equilibrium. We don't have to worry about it. For example, see the Industrial Revolution. Jobs were destroyed, agricultural destroyed, new jobs were developed in manufacturing. See, nothing to worry about. So I started looking what really happened over the past generation. And it turns out that we have a case study to do, which is US manufacturing. So there is this myth that US manufacturing has all gone away, but in reality, US manufacturing in terms of volume is an all-time high. US is manufacturing more than $2 trillion a year of added value in manufacturing. But manufacturing employment peaked around 1980 at about 20 million jobs, and it is now down to about 12 million jobs. So about 8 million jobs have been lost. Now again, standard economics will tell us, no problem, these people will have found other jobs. So we can take a look to see what happened to working class people over the past generation. And once you start looking at the data, it's not pretty. You see that by any measure, the outcome has been quite adverse. For example, when you look at real income, real means adjusted for inflation, then income of working class men in the United States is now lower than it was 40 years ago. So you have a whole generation that from their point of view, they have not only not progressed, they actually have regressed economically. You look at other type of data shows you that when you look at a better measure of measuring unemployment, which is not the official unemployment, but a broader measure, which is called labor force participation. Labor force participation for men in what we call prime age men, which is 25 to 54, is down from about 97 to 88%. When you focus on working class men, it's down even further. And it means that 1 in 5 working class men of prime age, 25 to 54, is not working. 20% of the men are not working. This is really a national and social crisis that has vast social implications. For example, the collapse of marriage among working class people in the United States. So something, even though classical economics tells us people will find jobs, something is not working. And when you dive in and you ask economists, so what's going on? And you says, well, it may take time. For example, why are people not finding jobs? They don't have the right skill levels. So what are the new jobs that we are generating? We have a whole fancy new job titles, website designer, data analytic visualization. This may not be jobs that are appropriate for people who came from the manufacturing line or from coal mines. Or there are cultural barriers. For example, there are a lot of jobs in healthcare. But very often these jobs are called pink-collar jobs that traditionally been taken by women. And many men are not, for cultural reasons, not willing to take these jobs. Many places are not willing to hire men for these jobs. And then there are mobility issues. There are more jobs now in the big cities, but the big cities are expensive. If you come from a small town, you may not you may not be able to afford to move to a big city. So for all kind of barriers, these people are not finding jobs. And what we have seen over the past year is these things do not happen without serious political consequences. So economists tell us, don't worry, in the long run, everything will work out. In the long run, we're all dead, said Keynes. You know, you can't tell people, don't worry, in 50 years, everything will work out. We need solution to people now. And it behooves us to find solution to these people. So I would say, if you look at the precedent in terms of what happened to working class people, it's not good. Now, of course, it raises the questions, what will happen to the professions? And are people within the profession, are professionals going to be more adaptable and be able to adjust what they do better than people in the working class? And that's partly the question we're going to be discussing today.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think yesterday we were all rather depressed at the end of your presentation, but like when Richard Susskind came in and said, we're all dead, and you say, we all said we're all dead then just now. I wonder if you can maybe cheer us up a bit and give us your perspective, and is there any hope for the profession?
Well, as you said, Rich, at the beginning, we've got a new paper that we published today on AI and specifically looking at the accountancy profession and what it means. And in the paper, we try and do a few things. We look firstly just at trying to get behind the hype a little bit about the technology, because we've been talking about AI for many, many years. And as you say, things like driverless cars have been an aspiration for, again, many, many years. And suddenly this is becoming reality. So I think it's important for us to understand the real impact of this. We need to understand what is really new about the technology, and obviously that's a lot about data and a lot about processing power, and there's things like that that make this different. And I think, you know, we start to to help people to understand really what is different about the technology, and to start thinking about that question, is this time going to be really different? We also want to apply it in the context specifically of accountancy. So how would accountants actually use AI in terms of what they do? What are the particular challenges? How does this impact with regulators and standard setters? How do the economics work out? How much do you have to spend on developing AI solutions, and how does that compare with the kind of return on investment? Because it's all those kinds of issues as well. It's not just here's a technology, it's how do you use it? What drives you to adopt it? What are the practical challenges? So we want to start thinking about all those aspects as well. And then there are those longer term questions. I mean, certainly at the moment where we are, AI is very much an opportunity to use data, to get more insight from data. Organizations are drowning in data, and things like machine learning are a really powerful way that accountants can help organizations get a lot more insight from data to help do prediction an awful lot better. But obviously in the long run, as this plays into automation and computers move further and further up the chain, we do need to think about what that means in terms of the role. I don't think anyone has any answers to that. I think we're all alive to the risks, and we're certainly not complacent in the work we do. We recognise very much that change is in the air, and we don't know how that's going to play out. But the most important thing is that we are at the front foot of it, and we understand it, and we are aware. And as Moshe said, it's about adaptability, and it's about changing the skills, the services, the tasks, all these kinds of things. That's what we need to be very much looking at. And we do feel the profession's always been very adaptable in the past. It's embraced many waves of automation in the past, and there's no reason to feel the profession can't adapt this time. But maybe more radical change is going to be required as computers move further into areas that we always think about as human judgment, like driving. That's always an aspect that we think of about human judgment, and maybe we will need to think about more radical change. But we certainly remain positive, and the report is really about providing a framework for us to do more work, to engage the profession, to engage with people across other professions, with experts, and to really start thinking about what that means for the future.
Okay, thank you for that. And we'll now get into some questions that have been sent through previously. And if you have any questions or indeed comments, then do send them through on Twitter at #ICAEWAI. And the first question, I suppose, is it really that bad? And thinking yesterday, what was your view of each other? Because there was a lady from the EU came on and said, the EU is very positive about it. We had a comment, a recommendation from a fellow connection on LinkedIn said, these guys definitely need to hear how you made your own job redundant using tech, which I thought was quite interesting to point. You talked about neo-Luddites and neo-classicals. Technology has always affected society and the profession, and the profession's always adapted. Citizens are better off and leading higher quality lives. Accountants are freeing themselves from low value level compliance work to concentrate on higher value, more interesting strategic work. Or the fact that you point to increasing inequality and a loss of jobs to new technology, or the Siskin's viewpoint that professions are opaque and outdated and available only to the privileged few. So I don't know if you've got any comments on, is it really that bad? Kirsten?
And I think there's an element of time frame about it, because I think where we are now, when, in our report we look at accountants using AI, we're still in practice in very early stages. So I think there's an element of time frame, and we had a round table earlier and we had a discussion about 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. So I think part of this is about time frame, and I think certainly where we are at the moment, it's very much an opportunity, but as we look further into the future, it becomes a lot less clear, because we don't know how the technology is going to develop and how powerful it's going to be. So I think an element of it is also about time frame and how quickly the computers adapt, and how we also accept them as human beings and how we interact with them. There's a lot of unknowns, I think, in terms of the future. So I think part of the positive negative thing is an element of time frame as well.
Okay, thanks. Any thoughts, Moshe?
Technology very often moves faster than people move. So one of the issues that we have with manufacturing is the speed in which things happen. We had automation coming up over a period of 30 years. And in fact, if you look at it, it's not even. There was a particular period of a decade in which we had very dramatic wave of automation. People don't react well to such changes. And so economy said it will work in the long term, but if you tell people you have 5 years in which completely reskill yourself, go back, find another job, it's difficult for people to do it. humanity is very resilient, very adaptable in the long run, but not so. We don't do so well in short-term challenges. And so right now we are through a period where it's clear a period of adaptation, and some parts of society have not adapted well, and now we're struggling with this. What will happen in the longer term? The profession partly defended themselves to some extent. They created a wave of practices and rules and regulation. I cannot go tomorrow and say, no, accounting needs to change radically. It's been over the years now. You have been here in this building how long now? Over 100 years, and you build a whole set of constraints that says you cannot change accounting fast. And in a way, it gives us stability. We don't want the rules of accounting to change very quickly, but it also ensures that even in the face of technology, accounting will not change radically fast. It may change radically in the long run, but it's very hard to change accounting very fast because of the whole set of rules around it.
But I think that does make it incumbent on us as a profession to be very focused on the value and not to feel complacent, because you said we have that regulatory environment, and so change is difficult for lots of reasons. But it's really important that we focus on how we actually make a difference to the world and what the profession's doing. And I think, when we lose sight of that, that's when we get into trouble. And, as we say, accountants don't get up to do accounting for the sake of accounting. It's to help organisations make better decisions. It's to hold people accountable for the decisions they make. It's to make sure that we are confident and have trust in the numbers that are there, and that encourage investment in the economy and growth. And that's what it's all about. And I think we have to make sure that we hold on to those higher purposes and the objective of the profession, and don't get too sucked into how we do things now and being complacent by maybe a slow pace of change and things like that. So certainly in the report we talk about that long-term vision and not being defensive and being open to that kind of more radical change, because ultimately we have to be about adding value and create, having a higher purpose. Otherwise, what's the point?
Well, that's an interesting point. And I think it opens to the next question, which has been a very popular question about the roles affected. And people want to know, when will I be affected? We had a conversation at lunchtime about the different business practice, large companies, small companies, firms. Just a couple of comments that came through from the LinkedIn thread. I'm really interested to hear about how the report deals with the vast differences in the roles that accountants play. A lot of current content doesn't distinguish between these roles when measuring future impact. Another question subsequent to that, I agree with that point. It will be interesting to see how the report deals with the multitudes of activities and tasks that an accountant performs, some of which I feel will still remain long into the future. My post deals specifically with my role as a CFO, not as an accountant in practice. And just thinking as well about the report by car friend Michael Osborne, The Future of Employment, How Susceptible Are Jobs to Computerization, and we talked about this, where accountants and auditors apparently are 94% likely to be automated, which is pretty scary, really. So, Kirsten, I know you have some examples in your report, and I don't know if you wanted to touch on, which roles might be affected.
Well, I mean, I agree with the point that accounting and auditing is such a vast term. It doesn't really mean anything, and it is important to break that down. And I think it's extremely difficult because the diversity of roles, the diversity in business practice, large, small, it's such a wide range of roles and tasks. And the way we've come at it is really to go out and ask people and look for very specific examples or use cases to see where this really helps accountants do things better and what problems it helps accountants to solve. And by building up a range of case studies and examples of where people are using it, where there's a business case, where there's where it's practical to use, then that may give us some indication of how it's going to develop, because it is still very much in early stages of practical adoption. And it's quite interesting, there's just such a wide range of diversity of examples we've seen. So on the one hand, we've got a company like Xero, who are very open and talking about how they're using machine learning to help in the automation of account coding, and they're looking at how they can use machine learning to improve on traditional ways of doing it, where there's just huge numbers of errors in and how that traditionally is done. On the other end of the spectrum, you've got the big firms and auditors and forensic accountants looking at how they can use machine learning to go through huge amounts of transactions and model what normal transactions look like as opposed to abnormal. So instead of testing huge numbers of transactions and coming up with thousands and thousands of exceptions, they can come up with a much more nuanced and better understanding of what's normal and what's not normal, so they can focus their activities much more clearly in areas that are highest risk. But also in business, we're talking to a technology company that uses machine learning to do its revenue forecasting. Again, they're a complicated business, they have huge amounts of data, and actually they compare their traditional ways of doing revenue forecasting with the machine learning version, and the machine learning is always more accurate. But that's not to say the machine learning is going to wholly take over. It's about triangulation between what the computer says, what the human says, what makes sense, and so it's a combination of all of those different things, but the machine learning model can actually come up with a more accurate revenue forecast in every case. So I think there's a real diversity of how we see this starting to be used, and as I said, I think it comes down to, do you have enough data or the right quality of data? What's the investment case? There's a whole range of circumstances and ways in which we're going to see it playing out.
Okay, thank you.
The Oxford study was criticized because they took a job as a monolithic thing. And various bodies, McKinsey for example, went further and took a job and broke the job into what are the tasks of this job. And the answer is some tasks you can automate and some tasks you cannot. So what we can expect to happen is that companies that want to use automation, either for better outcome or to cut the labor cost, they will re-engineer the business. They will take the jobs and unbundle them, and it says, this we are going to automate, and maybe a new package of jobs we will bundle again and will create new type of jobs. So what we can accept is we are not going to have complete automation, but we can expect a reshuffling of the task in such a way that some will be automated, the more routine one will be automated, and the less routine one will be rebundled and create new kind of jobs. And the challenge that it poses is that many of the entry-level jobs very often consist of the more routine aspects of accounting. And this one you can expect that will be automated. And so we're going to have a challenge. What are the entry-level jobs? Because we've automated all the routine tasks. And you cannot take someone without experience and immediately put them in the higher level judgment type jobs. So that's what I see as a major challenge coming up.
Okay, no, thank you for that. And that brings us interesting on to skills and the impacts on skills. What do we need to help our members and students prepare for a world of AI where much of their traditional work is undertaken by machines? And as you're talking about experience there, how can we help our student members and younger members get experience so that the judgment which a chartered accountant is meant to have is learned by experience? How can we get them to that level?
I think one is that the people who do accounting, as accounting become more tech heavy, we cannot let this be a black box. You will have to expect the people who use this system to have a deeper understanding of what's going on. If some deep learning system flags something and said, I suspect there is fraud here, you can't just rely on that. You'll have to come up and understand why there is a fraud. Can we substantiate it? This system will make mistakes, and human will be there to check the system. So first of all, I would say the accountants will have to have, the accounting professionals will have to have more technical backgrounds than they have today, because the field will become more technically intensive. So this is a whole new type of skills. But the other thing I think we'll have to make up for some experience that now you get on the job, you'll not get it on the job anymore. So I think the education and training part will have to start going faster into skip the routine stuff and go faster to the human level, judgment level, strategic level, storytelling skills. You can't just say, oh, people, you learn it on the job, because you may not have an opportunity to learn it on the job. So we will have to rethink how we educate the professionals.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is. And I would put it in a bit of historical context, because we've been saying this for many years, because accountancy has had automation for many years, and things don't get done on paper in the way they used to. It gets done on computers. Things often get done in outsourcing or offshoring or in processing centres. So again, a lot of that mundane work has shifted in many cases anyway, and that's not stopped professionals and students getting good experience, but obviously this takes it to another level, and I think absolutely it comes down to understanding how we learn and how we develop that judgment. It links into the operating models and the business models of the firms, for example, who traditionally have always recruited lots of young graduates, and how that continues to work in the future is obviously something that's being discussed at that level. So I think it clearly is something we need to think about and work out how people do get that level of judgment and experience. But I said maybe it is about different skills as well. As you said, it's we've always said for a number of years, accountants need more skills in IT and technology and data and all these kinds of things, and our qualification is incorporating a lot more of that, and I think that's probably just the beginning, and more will need to be done.
Okay, thank you for that. One of the joys of opening out to questions from Twitter is that you get questions in from Twitter that you haven't prepared for. But let's give it a go. We've got 2 questions here, so I'll read them both out and you can choose to answer them or ignore them as you want to. So, are current machine learning algorithms really at the level that they can perform internal and external audits? Question 1. And then, what about decision making by these algorithms on opinions which influence the lives of users? So, any thoughts about internal, external audit?
I'll let you answer that.
Well, I'm not an auditor, so that's always my get-out. I'm not an auditor either.
Well, I would say it's rather early days, really, isn't it? I mean, it's being used to on 100% sampling to try and get your 5,000 outliers sorted. But
no, I think there's still a lot. I think there's still a long way to go from that, and there's a lot of. There's a lot of piloting and proofs of concept and trying things out, and how accurate models are, I think, is still unclear. I'm sure there's still a lot of work to do, because it does come down to having enough data, having enough good quality data. It comes down to data. I mean, that is the fundamental challenge here, and I think we're still in early stages to know whether the data is enough and is good enough to really get the level of accuracy, because that's what gives you the accuracy, is having enough data. If you don't have the data, your accuracy is not good enough. So I think those are the kinds of questions we need to be looking at in the next few years to build our understanding of how far this is going to go, to sort of understand how much data you do need and whether how effective and accurate it can be.
Well, the second question, I think, touched on a very important social issue, which is which decision are we willing to relegate to machine, and which decision should be exclusively human decisions. One domain in which this discussion is already taking place very aggressively is around the area of lethal autonomous weapon system, so-called killer robots. Should we allow machines to make decisions autonomously to terminate the life of human beings? But in a more closer to us, people have tried to apply this machine learning system to various legal decisions. They have to do with bail, parole, sentencing. These are all decisions in which we know the human beings make very imperfect decisions. And therefore, people are saying, let's assemble data that no human judge will ever collect so much data. When it comes to, for example, parole, we are interested in recidivism. We can have hundreds of thousands of cases. We can create much better judgments than individual judge can have. But are we willing to delegate this kind of decision about human lives to machines? And this is now a philosophical and ethical decision as a society we need to grapple with. And there's no hard answer. It's possible that these machines will make better decisions than humans. But other people are arguing that these are ultimately decisions about human dignity, and they should be always exclusively human. Maybe we'll have what we call augmented intelligence, a machine providing data to a judge, but the decision should be left to a human judge. And the same thing, when you ask about accounting decisions that affect people's lives, we have as a society to decide, do we have a go, no-go lines? Do we have red lines that we are not willing to cross?
That's interesting. That segues into the final question. We've got about 2 minutes. We've got about 30 seconds each if you want to answer this, which is policy and the power to influence. And it is the rise of robots inevitable? And just sort of cutting to the chase, thoughts on universal basic income and taxing robots in 30 seconds. Any thoughts there?
Well, my view is just, not to get into the detail of those, is that none of this is determined. I don't believe in technological determinism. We can shape how this plays out, but we need to engage in the debate. We need policymakers to get educated and to understand what the issues are and to understand. And we need to make educated choices, because we can choose to do things, we can choose not to do things, but we need to understand the issues and engage and have that kind of debate. Otherwise, things will just happen and we'll end up in a society that maybe is not where we want to be at all. So we need to make decisions and shape the society we want from this kind of powerful technology. That's my take on it.
There is a slogan I discovered recently that goes back, in fact, to the 1980s, and is technology is driving the future. We should be controlling the steering wheel. So the answer is, in some sense, yes, the development of the technology is kind of inevitable. I mean, we don't know of any way, there's no way we can control all of humanity, stop doing some technology. But how it gets deployed, how it gets used, that should be under our own control. We should not let technology be our master. We should be the master of the technology.
Okay,
I
fantastic.
think we're in violent agreement.
On that note, I think our time is up, so many thanks to you for tuning in today, and thanks to Kirsten and Moshe for your time. We really appreciate it. Thank you and goodbye.
Our pleasure.